The New York Islanders lost to the Vegas Golden Knights 3-2. They made some of the same mistakes, but we'll also talk about some areas they really showed improvement as Patrick Roy continues to introduce his system to this team. All that and more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Wednesday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. We have got a lot to discuss on today's show as the Islanders continue to learn Patrick Roy's system. But first, if there's something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, you can email us at lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You can also follow the show on X at Locked On Isles, and you can follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR VSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all season long, and I am live tweeting during nearly every Islanders home and road game. So join me for some instant insight and analysis. And it's great to talk Islanders hockey with you, game time or anytime. Frustrating loss for the New York Islanders. They fall to the Vegas Golden Knights. Final score in this one, 3-2. And before we go any further, congratulations are in order. Brock Nelson, who scored the Islanders' first goal of the night, that was also his 500th career point. So Brock reaching that milestone. And, you know, it's one of those things where Brock Nelson is kind of like a fine wine. The older he gets, the better he seems to get. And he has those 500 points in 805 career games, but, you know, did not have a 30-goal season in the NHL until he turned 30. And, you know, his two best seasons of his career have been the last 2 years, and he's already past the 20-goal mark. He has 21 on the season. So Brock Nelson getting the milestone of 500 points, and hopefully there will be many more in his future. But to get to the bigger picture, to get to the game, we saw a lot of the same things that have been plaguing this team all year coming back to plague them again. You know, the Islanders gave up 3 goals in this game. One of them, I think, was a bad play by Ilya Sorokin, where he was a little too deep in his net, a little too far over toward one post, did not play the angle effectively. Bam. Puck is in the back of the net. But then there were the giveaways. Mathew Barzal with one of them. Noah Dobson with one of them. A bad penalty by Scott Mayfield. A bad play by Mathew Barzal to take a penalty while the Islanders were on the power play. I mean, this was sort of like watching a repeat of your favorite television show, or maybe in this case of your least favorite television show, because a lot of these mistakes were only too familiar to this Islanders team. And, you know, I thought about it, and you realize, okay, you didn't really think Patrick Roy was going to cause this team to go 36-0 the rest of the season. That wasn't going to happen. And you also knew that it wasn't going to be immediately that Patrick Waugh says, okay, guys, this is what you used to do under Lane Lambert. This is what you're going to do now instead under me. And the team was automatically going to get it and do it like they've been doing it for 20 years. No. At this point, what we're seeing is, and what we saw in this game, the first period, especially, let's say the first 6 or 7 minutes, Islanders playing really solid hockey. The pace was quicker. The zone exits were better. The passing was crisper than it had been in a while. There were some definite improvements, but then when things get a little tough, the default mode for these guys is still Lane Lambert's system. And, you know, they sort of are still thinking a little bit about the instructions that Patrick Waugh is giving them. It's still not second nature. And so you still have some of these breakdowns going on that ended up as bad mistakes that ended up in the back of the net for the New York Islanders. And it's frustrating, but the only thing I can say is we saw some improvement in a lot of areas, and it's going to take a little time. And to me, certainly, you know, there's 2 games left before the All-Star break. Those are the next 2 games that I think is going to complete the major part of the feeling out process between this team and Patrick Waugh. He's going to see, you know, what the team needs to do. He's going to see the guys who he thinks can do it. He's going to make whatever changes he feels he wants to make. I mean, we saw a few. Mike Riley back in the lineup. Samuel Bolduc sitting. That was certainly one change. But I think we'll see more lineup changes. We'll probably see more line combination changes. And maybe even a player or two who could get called up from Bridgeport. But, you know, right now, this team is still trying to figure out what they need to do to get to that next level and figure out how to make Patrick Waugh's system that he wants to implement second nature for this team. Now, another thing we saw that was same old Islanders, boy, oh boy, the power play. They struggled badly, and 0 for 3. Okay, they did get the first goal, the Brock Nelson goal, came on a delayed penalty. So technically, while it wasn't officially a power play goal, there were 6 attackers on 5 on the ice. But the power play had 3 chances in the third period when you're down 2 goals and then down 1 goal to try to get the equalizer, to try to get the team closer. And again, I think they're reverting back to not moving enough without the puck and not moving the puck quickly enough. And while they did have some chances, they were too often sloppy with the puck, turned it over, puck goes down the other ice, got to regroup, got to start all over again. The power play still needs some work. And taking another penalty, Barzy taking a penalty while you're on the power play. No, that cannot happen. And it's happening, and it's happening again. But another area that I thought was much, much better. What were the shots on goal in this game? One team had 43 shots. The other had 27. Guess what? The team with the 43 shots on goal was the Islanders. They only gave up 27 shots to the defending Stanley Cup champions. And I can tell you right now, if they outshoot their opponents 43 to 27 or something relatively close to that, if they keep their opponents to 30 shots or less, most games, they're going to win most of those games. And, the bad play by Adam Pelech that set up one goal, the bad play by Dobson, the bad play by Mayfield, the bad play by Barzal. These are things that we're going to see how quickly Patrick Waugh can work some of these things out of their system. And it's important and it will take time. But I think overall the tempo was better. The hustle was better. The dedication was better. It was not a mistake-free game. They're never going to play a fully mistake-free game. But it was a game where they were playing better, learning the new system, and I'm happy to say at least progress has been made by the Islanders. And again, if they play the way they played last night, they're going to win a lot more games than they lose. They got to finish better. They got to work on a few things, but this was a step in the right direction, even if the scoreboard at the end of the day did not ultimately reflect that. We've got a lot more to get to on today's show. We're going to discuss, we'll have our hero and go to the game. Plus, we're going to discuss a very insightful quote by Mathew Barzal that I think is really worthy of discussing. We'll have our weekly farm report. And, oh, yeah, our Islanders' birthday of the day. The player who I believe is the only player who has won a Stanley Cup for both the Islanders and the Rangers. Let's see if you can guess who that is. We've got all that and more still to come on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and the matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. So join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of Locked On Islanders will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. So let's talk a little bit about our hero and GOAT of the game. And I've been thinking about this. And the hero to me, I'm going with Brock Nelson. Yeah, okay. JG Pageau had the shorty, and it was a pretty play, and I give him credit. But Nelson played pretty well, and getting that 500th point, scoring what was at the time the tying goal, I got to give the honor of hero of the game to Brock Nelson. Go to the game. Boy, you know what? There's a lot of ways I could go, but I'm going to go with the power play because when you have 3 chances in the third period to either pull to within 1 or tie the game, you can't be as sloppy as the power play was. You can't take a penalty on the power play. Are you listening, Barzy? These are things you cannot do. So to me, the power play ending up as the GOAT of the game. Couple of interesting stats. Matt Martin, 5 hits in 9 minutes. and 17 seconds of ice time. He led the team in that department. Who do you think led the team in blocked shots? And the Islanders didn't block many of them, although there weren't as many shots attempted against them. If you said Bo Horvat, you were correct. Horvat with 2 block shots. Nobody else had more than 1, but overall. And then the giveaway department, too many. 3 for Dauber, 2 for Alexander Romanov, 2 for Pelech, 2 for Barzal, 2 for Horvat, and then 1 by a bunch of other players, but that just isn't going to get it done. Now, got to talk about this quote from Mathew Barzal. And let's talk about it here. Here's what Barzy said. To be quite honest with you, there's a lot of new concepts. He's talking about Patrick Roy and what he's introducing. There's a lot of habits that we have to break. Now, here's the key part. Just being blunt, a lot of laziness has crept in over the last little while. So he's not here for that, which is perfect for us. This is an admission that for whatever reason, under Lane Lambert in recent weeks, the players themselves can see that they weren't playing the game the right way. They weren't responding to whatever it was that Lane Lambert was telling them. Whether it was they were tuning him out or they just were so comfortable with it that it was nothing special to them, I really don't know. But ultimately, this quote speaks volumes about the fact that this team really, really needed the coaching change. And look, there's a bunch of reasons why Mathew Barzal didn't say this or none of the players said this sooner. You don't throw your coach under the bus, okay? Especially when you have, he's in charge of how much ice time you get. And, as long as he's the guy in charge, you're not going to necessarily throw him under the bus. And to take it a step further, let's be honest. Sometimes you don't realize how bad a situation is or how much something, is good or bad until something changes. And once the change takes place, you sort of look back and you go, wow, how did we miss that? How did we not realize what was going on while we were doing that thing we used to be doing? And it is a good thing for the New York Islanders right now. Number one, that the change took place. But number two, that the players, after hearing Patrick Roy for half a week, 4 or 5 days at this point, see the bad habits that they had. The laziness is the word that Mathew Barzal used. And, they just needed a shakeup at this point. And believe me, if anybody is going to shake this team up, Patrick Roy is the guy to do it. He commands respect. He has won both at the NHL level and at the junior level. He has won as a player. I mean, clearly one of the greatest players in the history of the NHL. And to put it bluntly, this team needed a change. And that's as blunt as any NHL player is going to say something about the need for a coaching change. And it's only going to be said after the fact, like this was. But there is no doubt, after reading that quote from Mathew Barzal and seeing the difference of how this team played last night against Vegas, that the coaching change was a good thing, that it was necessary, and that this team now has a different outlook, a different attitude. And look, changing coaches does not guarantee you anything. You might get a bump, you might not. You might all of a sudden play better over the rest of the season? You may not. This team has its flaws as to the way it's built, as to the way the roster is constructed. But let's face it, keeping things the way they were, if you want to make the playoffs, if you want to have a chance to be better, they couldn't keep doing the same things they were doing over and over again. And so clearly that change had to be made. It was made. And here we are with the legendary Patrick Waugh behind the bench for the New York Islanders. And so far, we are seeing some improvement in a lot of areas, but there's still a lot of work to be done. We have got more to get to on today's show. We will have our weekly farm report on all things Bridgeport Islanders, plus our Islanders birthday of the day. All that and more still to come on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. We're past the halfway point in the season, Islanders fans, and we are in the thick of the playoff hunt. But regardless of where we are in the standings, I want to remind you that you can win big playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey. With Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like Horvat, McDavid, or McKinnon will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in a given game. And to win a 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Islander fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league, including the NHL. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. So time for our weekly farm report where we discuss all things Bridgeport Islanders and another difficult weekend for Bridgeport. First game of the weekend, they face the Hartford Wolfpack. That's the Rangers AHL affiliate. And they end up falling in that game at home by a score of 3-0. That made it 2 times the team had been shut out in their last 3 games, which is never what you want to do. Jakub Skarek, again, the goaltender in this one, and it was first responders night, but not a good enough effort by the Islanders. And of course, nobody has a point streak when you get shut out. On Sunday, however, they faced the Providence Bruins, and this one went to overtime. Islanders falling 2-1 in a tight checking defensive duel with Providence, but the final score 2-1 Providence. William Dufour gets his 10th goal. That was on the very first shot on goal by the Islanders in the game, but 44 seconds into the second period, the game is tied on a goal by John Beecher. Henrik Tikkanen, 30 saves in what ended up being a losing effort, but at least the Islanders did get a point. So certainly you take that. So 0-1-1 on the weekend. And I guess the problem with that, when you look at the standings, is that the Islanders right now are 13 points behind 7th place Lehigh Valley, and they don't have any games in hand. So we're past the halfway mark of the AHL season, and through 38 games with 34 to go, the Islanders are 11-22-5. That is a .355 points percentage, which, is right now the worst record in the AHL. As for the leading scorers, Ruslan Ishkakov leads the team with 13 goals, leads the team with 20 assists, and obviously with 33 points. Otto Koivula has 22 points. William Dufour now second on the team with the 10 goals. Carlson Kuhlman has 7. Otto Koivula 8. But overall, the team is struggling. Robin Salo, now the leader among defensemen in points. He has 5 goals and 15 assists. Dennis Chalowski, 4 goals and 14 assists, not far behind him. As for the goaltending, Jakub Skarek, 3-15 and 4 on the year, an 884 save percentage, and a 336 goals against average. Now, the good news, since the Islanders activated Semyon Varlamov from IR, that means that Ken Appleby will be back in between the pipes for Bridgeport, and they need him. He has been the better goalie statistically this season, and it's good to see that he will be back because the team does need him. As for games this weekend, there are 2. Friday night, 7:05, a road game at Providence facing the Providence Bruins, and then Saturday night, 7 o'clock Eastern time, a home and home. Providence coming to Bridgeport to face the Bridgeport Islanders. And if you want to see Ruslan Ishkakov, Matt Maggio, William Dufour before they join the New York Islanders, you can get tickets for the Bridgeport Islanders game, or you could watch all AHL games on AHL TV. One more game after that next Wednesday, but that will be after our next farm report. So just wanted to mention there's a Wednesday home game, January 31st at 7 o'clock Eastern time. I want to know how many people got the answer to our Islanders birthday of the day. The only player who won a Stanley Cup for both the Islanders and the Rangers. And, we are a couple of days behind. We had, a birthday Sunday and then 3 birthdays on Monday. So we had to figure out an order. But Monday was the 62nd birthday of former Islanders forward Greg Gilbert. Gilbert, a 4th-round pick by the Isles in 1980, and joined the team for one game in the 81-82 season, scored a goal in that game, played in 4 playoff games that year, and then was a full member of the team in 82-83, and in 83-84, he played 79 games and had a career-high 31 goals and 66 points. But after that, he was more of a two-way forward, more of a checking forward, did score 17 goals for the Islanders in 87-88, but then was dealt to the Blackhawks late in the 88-89 season, played for Chicago, got dealt to the Rangers in 93-94 and won a cup there, and then spent his last 2 NHL seasons with the Blues, played in 837 NHL games, 150 goals, 378 points, and 576 penalty minutes, add 17 goals and 50 points in 133 postseason games. And here's a guy who, after he retired, went on to be a head coach for the Calgary Flames for a few years in the early 2000s and coached as recently as 2020-2021 in the Quebec Junior League with the St. John's Sea Dogs. So here's a guy who has stayed active in hockey since leaving the game as a player. One of his better games as an Islander, well, how about February 25th, 1984 at the Nassau Coliseum? The Devils, the visiting team with Ron Lowe as their goalie, Rolly the goalie, Roland Melanson, the goalie for the Islanders. And in this game, Greg Gilbert gets a hat trick. His first goal opened the scoring on the power play. Bossy and Trottier with the assists. Then he added one in the opening minute of the third period. Trottier and Bossy again the assist. And then 3 minutes and 20 seconds after that, again assisted by Brian Trottier, and Mike Bossy. Helps when you're moved up to that top line, doesn't it? Gilbert, 3 goals on 3 shots in this game, 1 on the power play, and he was a +3. Islanders crush the Devils by a score of 7-1. Mike Bossy had 4 assists. Brian Trottier, a goal and 3 assists, and the first career hat trick for Greg Gilbert. He is our Islanders birthday of the day. I want to thank everyone for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow on the show, make sure you join us. We're going to preview Patrick Roy's return to Montreal as coach of the New York Islanders. It is definitely going to be an emotional moment for Roy, for the fans in Montreal. So we'll talk all about that on tomorrow's show. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. And of course, let's go Islanders.